wardrobe, what they used to call it, right? A chest, what is the word? A seat, there you go, that's it. Go in there and get those documents out and sit grandma and them down and go through some of those documents to know exactly what's going on with her house, know exactly what's going on with, what she has going on, because I promise you, although Junebug was her favorite nephew, Junebug don't know what's going on. You never want to leave it up to Junebug. For those of you who don't have a Junebug, I'm sure you have one of those other names in there. I know I got a few. We a little hood in my family. Next slide. Know your inventory. Start things out by going through that chessel or that wardrobe and look at all of the real estate that you may have ownership in, including residential homes, multifamily investment properties. What do you really have ownership in? This is very important because that is one of the main reasons why Junebug and Keisha and them fighting at the funeral, because grandma owned that house in the park. For those of you in Baton Rouge, she owned that house in the park, and now grandma has now passed, and now they don't know what to do with it. So you have to know, and I've been in situations with clients where 10 years after a person has passed, and of course the government has to go through certain channels to assume that property, but 10 years they find out they are a part of a little piece of land. My name was on land that's worth $550,000. Well, I mean, if you're splitting that up by 3 people, yet that little piece of pie is a nice piece, right? I know I would like an extra. I know, that's right. So to do this, you must acquire, this is a legal term, an abstract of title. What is an abstract of title? It's a record that details a complete legal history from the first record of ownership to the present day. It's very important that you get, and I would kind of push and advise anyone who has any type of ownership over anything, especially if you're moving around in states and all those things, get an abstract of title on your asset, because what that does is that lets you know if you have any encumbersome, if you have any challenges with the property, if you're not the full owner and you got a cousin that your daddy never told you about, or a brother that your daddy never told you about, and that lets you know what you have to do before you get to that point. Find out now or you will fight over it later. Next slide. Are there any encumbrances? An encumbrance is a claim against an asset by an entity that is not the owner. Common types of encumbrance against a property include liens, easement, lease, mortgages, or any other restrictive covenants. Encumbrances impact the transferability of a property. So if you have any encumbrances, there are 2 specific ones that I want to mention, but a mortgage is an encumbrance. A lien, if you owe any taxes, I know that's the big thing. Well, we got the land, but we owe $650,000 worth of taxes. Well, we can't do nothing with it, and then you're backed up against the wall to let the state have it. You don't want to be in that situation, so it's very important that you know what's going on. Now, an easement, the 2 that I want to talk about, an easement and an encroachment. An easement grants another person or entity the right to access your property. So you own it, but you have to let somebody come through it. Now, I know New Orleans has a lot of real estate like this, where you have a house in front on the street, and then you have another house behind it, and you have to use the other individual's driveway to get to their property. So imagine owning the property on the backside. You can't get mad because you don't like the house in front of you, because you don't own that. That doesn't belong to you. But you have to use that street. And another easement or example of an easement is a utility company. If Energy has a item, or if Energy has a device on your land, you got to give them access to go back there and do what they need to do with it, right? Because if that particular piece of equipment goes out and everybody on your street don't have power, you can't say, nope, I got my petunias back there growing. You ain't coming back here messing with my petunias. No, go back there and they're going to do what they got to do, because you owe them usufruct. You use that term, usufruct. Another common item that's an encumbrance is an encroachment. An encroachment is anything that may intrude or enter another person's land. In other words, a good example of that, there's grandma's peach tree that now extends over to the next door neighbors. Well, as much as we love them, that peach cobbler, that girl, just me. As much as you love that peach cobbler, they have the right to cut that tree at the property line. Gone. No more peach pies for Christmas, okay? So it's very important that you know these things in order for you to make certain adjustments, because I know you'd be upset if somebody came in and started gutting away at certain areas of your property or what you think is your property. So it's very important that you understand what belongs to you. How do you do that? You get a land survey. You go to the court and you say, hey, I want to know where my property line starts, and I want to know where my property line ends. I ran into an issue, and actually my parents, back in Baton Rouge, I'm from Baton Rouge. Whoop, whoop. Baton Rouge people. No, nobody else? Okay, just me. All right, there you go. You got to tell them where you're from when you tell them. But in Baton Rouge, my parents have a pretty nice house in Woodland Ridge in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, right off of Sherwood Forest. And we purchased the land, and in the backyard, the neighbor's yard slightly comes over a little bit into my parents' property. Well, the neighbor decided they wanted to get an electric pole installed on my parents' property. Well, unbeknownst to myself and my parents, after a certain amount of time, if that pole is still there, they can assume that land. And you know what that means for you? When you do an appraisal or you get your land, the amount or value appraised on you lost that square footage, right? So simple things like that could be large headaches years down the line, because and don't get me wrong, nobody can just put something on your property and say, okay, that tree is mine, that land is mine. No, it takes a certain amount of years for that to happen. But imagine if you live in a house for 40 years. You know, most people I know, especially most people that look like me, you buy a property and you have it for a long time. I know my grandmother stayed in her house for at least 50 years. And, you know, you don't take into consideration, you know, certain little things that happen. You trying to be a good neighbor. No, it's cool. You can park it right here. And they thinking in their head, that's mine in 5 years. So you really have to stay on top of these things and get those surveys taken care of. Next slide. In that, as you, yep, there you go. In that, as you are going through all of this, now real estate laws and real estate rules and regulations in Louisiana change so often. That's why each state has a governing board that handles the matters in regards to real estate. So I don't expect anybody in here to know all of these rules. That's why you get a responsible real estate administrator to make sure that everything is going the way it needs to go. And then even after you pass, you have somebody in place that's going to take care of all of the needs. A real estate administrator oversees the day-to-day operations of real estate offices. As a real estate administrator, your job is to interact with tenants and coordinate with property managers to ensure that every property lives up to its expectation. Now, that particular definition applies to multifamily housing. If you know, grandma and them, I love my grandma, by the way. I like to talk about her a whole lot, so y'all gonna hear her name a lot. But if you have a multifamily unit, you got a duplex, so you have some type of living arrangements where you are the owner of commercial property or something in that regard. You're not the person that collects the rent every month. You let Junebug them go over there and get the rent from whoever live in that house or whatever the case may be. So it's very important that whoever you assign to do and take out and handle all of the affairs is somebody that you trust and is somebody that is relevant to what you do. Now, you've met a really good property manager. So if you need any help with that, that was one of my plugs. You're going to get two more after I sit down. All right. Disposal. Next slide. Disposal. If you decide to get rid of your property or you decide to transfer it to anyone, it's very important, again, that you seek a knowledgeable advisor. Now, I think I switched the term on real estate agent. I don't consider myself a real estate agent. I consider myself an advisor, because real estate agents want your money and they just want to make transactions. I don't care about that. I care about advising you on the best course of action regarding your real estate. God put me in this position to not just make money because that comes with it, but he put me in the position because he knows that I have a heart to help people find what the solution to their issue is or the challenge regarding real estate. So find someone that has a good heart and has your best interest in mind and not just willing to make a buck, because that is unfortunately the sea of agents per se. So really get to know what, get to know your agent so that you can prepare to do this. This next section, next slide. The next section, I just wanted to touch on, I can use it now? Okay, perfect. Let me see. Uh-oh, you cooking with grease back there, Sister Triplet. All right. The next section of this, and I'll sit down. I know it was a big question about real estate investments, and people are interested. I know that's the trend now. Everybody wants a property. Everybody wants a piece of land or whatever that is to create that lane of generational wealth. Let me say this: real estate has been one of the single aspects and areas in life that people have become millionaires, billionaires, and they have been successful in throughout generations, because unlike everything else, real estate you can't get more of, right? There's no more earth. Once this little square plot of land is occupied and named, they can't make another piece of land just like that. There will not ever be another West Bank Road. That is it. All right? So it's very important that we understand some of these real estate investments, one of which is residential real estate. That includes long-term rental properties, vacation rentals, if you flip houses, micro flipping, and ADU, accessory dwelling units. Long-term rental properties, that's a residential house, that's your grandmother's house, your auntie's house. Vacation rentals, you own a house in Florida and you live in Louisiana and you want to rent it out to people. Flipping houses, I know that's a big thing. And I say this to my wholesalers. That time is coming to an end. So if you are a wholesaler, I would get linked up with a real estate agent, because the LREC and the Louisiana guidelines are starting to change to put these people, wholesalers, under a regulatory system. Right now, there is not a regulatory system for wholesalers. So as far as being a servant of the public, a lot of things can go wrong and you just kind of stuck, because there's nobody to say, hey, you did that wrong, you need to do it again. So it's very important that you know what's going on with the wholesaling. Micro flipping, just like flipping houses, but you don't have as much responsibility. You just kind of there. You put a little bit of money up front. It doesn't take a whole lot. Accessory dwelling units, that's say you have an additional part of your house. You have a backyard area that has a mother-in-law suite, and you want to rent that out to someone. There are rules and there are regulatory laws in place for items like that. So it's very important that you know the rules regarding that. Commercial real estate, that entails hotels, warehouses, office spaces, and retail stores. It's typically not residential. It involves businesses, churches, items like that. I'm moving kind of fast because I know I got a lot of information and I got about 2 minutes. Raw land, this is what we talk about. Raw land investment property is really, really good because, one, it has to have absolutely nothing on it. Really good because, again, land is not something that they create every day. You're not growing a new plot of land in 50 years. No, that piece of land is going to always be there unless you do something with it. And a lot of times land is worth more with nothing on it, because investors like to, do things and create cash flow. So if you have raw land, that's a perfect investment opportunity. You could go into agriculture. You can grow watermelons or cucumbers or whatever you want to do on your land and sell this. So it's very lucrative area. And then with land, the price increases after time. So if you keep a little small plot of land, I know some seasoned saints back in the day, they bought a piece of land for $5,000 and it was 4 acres. Now that 4 acres is worth millions of dollars. I'll give you a good example. In Baton Rouge, by Segan Lane, by the Women's Hospital, Jubin, all that area. It was undeveloped. There was nothing there. When those people bought that land, it was pennies. They bought it for pennies. Now, since there's a hospital and there's situs, there are things in that area, that land has jacked up. My family, my dad found out that he had a little piece of land that belonged to one of our old family members. They bought it for $16,000, and now it's worth $2 million. So it's very important, again, going back to the first thing that I said, that you know what you own. You got to know what you have, know what's in your inventory. Real estate trust investments, REITs, are companies that operate as a trust and oversee a number of real estate investments. This goes back to one of the things Brother Yahweh was referring to. If you get involved in something like that, it could be lucrative for you. You'll have a nice set of passive income that you could, do some other things with. Real estate crowdfunding, and this is kind of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's a new method in which investors band together, typically online. They pull funds in and invest in opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do alone. In other words, and I would say to translate that with your family, you and your cousins and your family members get together, y'all put a certain percentage in place, and y'all go buy a 500-unit apartment complex, and y'all manage it together and split the cash flow. All of these investments are ultimately so that you can get money. Nobody wants to have a piece of land and then not do anything. That just makes you have to pay more, and you have more liability. So it's very important that you know what's going on as it relates to what you own and all of the things that you're a part of, so that you can really, really get the best bang out of your buck. Because for years, people that look like me and you, we had no idea that we had a whole lot of money in our pockets. Whereas in other people that don't look like us, they understand the rules, and they have people in place to take care and handle all of these items, and that's how they become the large, huge companies. I'll give you one good example, and I'll take my seat. Most people don't know, y'all familiar with Jimmy Swaggart out of Baton Rouge, right? The preacher in Baton Rouge. Well, most people don't know that Jimmy Swaggart owned from Bluebonnet to Perkins, all of that land. So where the mall sits and all of that land, he owned it. Well, he didn't sell it. He started leasing it out to the mall and other people. So he's getting, not only does he own the land, but he's getting all of the money from a lease from a mall or hospital or hotel. So it's very important, again, that you know what you have and know what you need to keep and know what you need to get rid of. I know I gave you a lot of information, but I love real estate so much. But if you have any questions regarding real estate or anything therein that won't get me in trouble, you have to see Brother Yahweh. But other than that, you can come see me, and then we'll talk about it. All right? Thank y'all so much for listening.
Yes, ma'am. So legally, what happens when you don't have a will and and it's community property, that half of that property goes to the children. The spouse keeps the other half. Now, if there's a home on that property, you get what is called a usufruct over that. So that means that the kids can't just kick the spouse out of the house. They can just still live in the house, but it's still half. Half still belongs to them, and so that's what that's speaking of.
And that piece also continuously divides depending on how many kids are involved.
Exactly.
So if you have 4 kids, then those halves somewhat change. You all right, First Lady?
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
It's half.
Ma'am?
I know that if it's community property, it's half.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, but if you have a will in place, it's still the half.
Yes, but no. If you have a will in place, that's the importance of a will. A will allows you to pretty much do whatever you give it to whoever you want to give it to. There's some exceptions, but that goes into some other legal concepts and stuff like that. Generally, you have a will, you can give it to who you want to give it to.
Okay, all right. Because at first when you was explaining the separated.
The separate property is different.
I realized what you were saying. First it was like, wait, And then when I thought about it separated, that's how it goes to the children and the
Yes,
spouses.
ma'am.
I mean, and the, parents and then spouse.
Keep in mind also that all of these rules are strictly in referencing Louisiana law.
Louisiana, exactly.
So, things may change when you start going into some other areas that don't have common law, because that particular law, forced heirship, if you die without a will,
Exactly.
then the state says that you are required to handle it the way that they want you to.
So there, and I didn't go into that, but there's basically, and without going into there's basically two types of wills. There's ones that you can, it has to be fully handwritten in the handwriting note. Like if my father goes a will, he had to write it out himself and things like that, sign it and all that good stuff. Then there's what is an authorized will, where it has to go before a notary, and you have to have a notary and two witnesses. And the thing with that is, the two witnesses cannot be part of the family, or they lose a portion. So, for example, my parents have 5, 6 kids. They write out a will, and for the most part, I would have to remove myself out of it unless they all agree. Because if not, if they say, okay, we're going to give Jaway this portion, my siblings have a problem with it, then I get the lesser of the portion. I can't get what they actually give me. So there's basically, for everybody to understand, conflict of interest. That's basically what it falls into.
Brother Oren, like I paid for several surveys, and you mentioned going to the courthouse and getting a survey. Is that a valuable option to go to the courthouse to get a survey?
Well, it depends. The court, and when I say go to the court, they just hold the records. They just keep an account of what the survey says. Now, usually there are a few different outlets that you could get a survey. I was going to say this earlier. There is no real cookie cutter path or system that will always work for an individual. Real estate and, of course, law with my brother, it is ever changing, and it really, really depends on your situation specifically. So I would have to get with you and see, what your challenges were with that to give you a better idea. But just to kind of give you a little understanding, the court just holds that information. You can handle surveys a few different ways. I would say usually to handle any appraisal or anything regarding those items, I would always go through my lender or go through a bank because it gives you a little bit more stability in that request. So, but hopefully I gave you a little understanding, and we'll chat.
I want to say something. I didn't bring up blended families, and that is very, very important. If you have a blended family and you and your spouse both are saved, now listen to this, if you and your spouse both are saved, it's no reason why your child should be the beneficiary of your insurance. And blended families bring a big problem when it comes to funerals because of the fact children don't like the step parent. But if you're both saved and you trust your spouse should always be your beneficiary.
The young lady in the back, she's standing up right now.
So I have 7 siblings, right? And by mouth, they have given me my mother's land. Do I need to get that legally in binding?
And I tell people this all the time, because there's this word of mouth thing that, all of my siblings say I can do this and do that and the third and all that great stuff. Things change. Number one, when money comes into play, and when property comes into play, because I've heard people say, I don't have no problem with, like you said, Junebug handling the will, until that comes up and it's time for the will to be open and people have to start getting property, and their thing is, I didn't mean all that. Louisiana is one where Louisiana recognizes verbal contracts. They're one of the few states that recognize those things. But the issue with a verbal contract is it's hard to prove. It is extreme, especially when it comes to real estate. They don't recognize verbal contracts with real estate. Those have to be written down legally and go through. But I always, even with the profession, I'm going to tell everyone, certain things you can't handle yourself. You don't need an attorney or anything like that. When I work for a judge, we have a lot of what is called pro se litigants, ones that represent themselves all the time. What oftentimes happens is that people run into issues because if you ever get challenged legally, that you're going to have to go through a lot of legal hurdles. And at the end of the day, you're going to lose money and you're going to lose time. So I'm going to say like my bishop tells us all the time, it's best you do it right the first time. That way you don't have to deal with it all over again and you have to keep going in these cycles. Because those costs, those succession costs, tend to add up as time progresses. You start bringing in attorneys and, like you said, you got to get surveys done and you got to bring in witnesses and all kind of stuff like that. You're talking about thousands of dollars. Get it right the first time.
Like Brother Yahweh, just to add to that, it's very, very difficult to enforce that word of mouth. And you and Junebug may not have the same ideas about what it is 10 years down the line. So I would advise, and you can start this today, go take pictures of your area. Go take pictures of your house. Go take every document regarding loans and any activity that you had with that particular asset. Get you a nice waterproof binder, waterproof apparatus to keep it, and store it. Put all of that stuff in one place and put it somewhere where everybody knows where it is. And you may be able put a lock on it or whatever makes you a little bit more secure. But take pictures of your property, take pictures of where the land starts, where it ends. Create a nice portfolio for yourself to keep it in your house in the event that anything happens, or you have to prove something. You'll already have all of that information right where you need it.
We had two.
Chairman. I want to address what she was saying about the 7 siblings. What happened when one of the siblings passed? They got 7 children.
Exactly. And it goes back to what we were talking about. And I know this is, most people think when legal, it gonna cost us money. Like I said, it's much cheaper to get it right the first time. You won't have to bring in, because like Bishop was talking about, you got 7 siblings. One of them died and they have 7 kids. Well, if you're trying to sell the property, that means you got to go through the process of getting the okay of all 7 of those people plus those 7 kids, because there has to be you don't have a will, so you have to get an agreement. Everybody signs off and say, okay, we give you the right to do this. We give you the right to do this. It becomes tedious, and it becomes expensive. I know people don't want to but. I know we get kind of tight when we don't want to pay for these things. I don't feel like I need to pay for this stuff. Like I said, it's best to pay for it and get it right. I'm not talking about going and get some big attorney that's gonna cost you $500,000, $600,000 to get this stuff done. For example, I know my mother had her hand up. There is someone that wanted me to handle something for them, and the cost was going to add up to being like around about $10,000. I don't feel like I should have to pay that much for it. That's fine, but I'm telling you, right? They dealt with this issue. They tried to handle it on their own. It didn't work out on the end. Now they have to come back and get another attorney to handle what they should have handled right the first time. Now it's going to cost them more money. I'm not telling you to break the bank, but I am telling you that some things, they're going to cost you a little bit of money. Now, there is what is called, if it's Louisiana states, and I'm just throwing this out here, if your property is under a certain amount of money, you don't really have to go through that, like property has to be, the home has to be under 250,000. I think that's what it is. All you have to do is do what is called a small succession. You just do an affidavit, file it with the clerk's office, and they'll do the succession. But I know all of you all, I would hope, have the desire that your property costs more than that, and you have a value more than 250,000.
One thing real quick, just to add to what he was saying in regards to real estate. I know some people think that you can sell your own house. I'm going to sell it myself. No, it's very important that you get a representative that is in the field, that knows what's going on, and prepare you to sell your house. Just like my brother was saying, you're going to pay way more money down the line on issues or mistakes that you may have made, not knowing the industry and not knowing what to do. So when anything regarding a transaction of an asset, of a commercial property, of land, I would strongly advise you get with a real estate advisor. I'm not putting my plug in there, but you know it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, any more questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So what? And that goes back to what I was talking about as far as writing a will. You want to leave it to your niece. You can do it. Do a handwritten, just simple statement saying, okay, I choose to leave this property, sign it. I will get it notarized and things like that. If you want to go through the technical aspects of it, you can get a will written out. You have to go through a notary and have 2 witnesses to sign off on that. But yeah, you can. There's 2 different ways you can do it. There's the ways that the simplest ways. There's other ways, but that will go into a deeper discussion. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your questions. If you have anything, Mr. Oren has already had his plug out. So, you all want to meet him, I can assist. I think Miss April is around also. So I can assist, if you all have any other questions that you all may have for me, and Mr. Lewis and his future funeral home. He's working for somebody right now, but we know he's about to be big time soon. But I will say this, and I'm not just saying this because that we're up here. Even if you choose not, okay, I don't want to use Brother Jaway as an attorney, or Mr. Newman as a real estate administrator, or Mr. Lewis as our funeral director, or anything of that nature. Find someone that you trust to get these balls moving. The more assets you gain during time, the harder it is to get these. Somebody asked me to do a succession. I said, look, what you need to have, I need a list of your debts and your assets. I know that's for certain people, all I own is my home. But not knowing that, okay, grandma got this stuff and they left it to us. And that's the difficulty with us as black people. We have so much stuff. We have property and everything like that. We don't have no knowledge of all the stuff that we have. Like he said, his father had property that's worth $2 million. I mean, and $2 million is great. You can sit up there and say all the time, oh, we got 50 acres of land. But until you actually have possession of these things, it means absolutely nothing. It don't mean anything. So find someone that can direct you legally, administratively, as far as you get these things. I know we all believe in faith that we're going to get our 10, we're going to be 70 years old. But as we all know, if you look in the news every day, we have children dying in elementary schools, high schools getting shot each and every day. People are barely living to 30 or 40, 50 years old. Have no will and no concept of where their stuff is going. And the state is gladly saying, if you don't want it, we will take it.
And they will, and they'll try to buy it while you're alive. Yep. They'll try to buy your land for pennies on a dollar if you don't know.
Yep.
what you have.
And so you get these things, and they're gonna give you this thing for cheap. And lastly, and I'm glad he touched on this. There is what he's talking about when they put this stuff on your property is what is called acquisitive prescription. Acquisitive prescription says that after a certain period of time, so we can keep these properties in commerce. If you, for example, I have a home, someone takes that half of my property, and I know they are not on my side of the property. I don't say anything. After 10 years, that property becomes theirs. I can't say nothing. Then there's what is called bad faith is you have a lot. That's why it's good to survey your property. You have a large portion of property. Somebody decides, you know what? I want that property. The property is so big, I'm just going to plant my flag on that property. I'm just going to take me about 1 acre or 2 acres of that land. You never survey the property. The state says after 30 years, that property becomes theirs. Theirs no longer yours. We got to keep it in the cycle.
It's funny in Georgia, and I just thought about it. In Georgia, there was a owner of land. A large development company decided to come in to this area. They bought some land, and they decided to build a subdivision in this area. And they started building in the area, but whoever's job to do the survey and to make sure that they were on their land didn't do a good job. So they were building this subdivision on land that didn't belong to them. Well, the owner of the land knew that he owned the land, and he saw them building, and he would pull up his truck every so often and park his truck right across the street from where they were building and just watch. And he would watch, and they would build. They would put the concrete foundations there, and he would watch, and he would watch, and he would watch, and he would watch. And then 6 months later, he says, "Thank you." And the contractors, they were baffled. They were like, well, what's going on? He said, well, you built all of that on my land. So imagine the hook that was for the people who didn't do the survey properly. So again, when we talk about these terms and we talk about these laws, they will enforce these laws, and there are people out there in the world that will look for an opportunity to take advantage of you.
Give mother a microphone, please. Oh, okay.
I'm gonna give you a mic. They need to know I ain't lying.
I just was agreeing with Orrin, I'm sorry. In 2009, my mom passed away. And in 2010, one of her relatives, because she was an only child, said they've been building trees on your mother's land without any knowledge of knowing. And at the end of the day, we lived very well for a while on the monies from the building on her property. She had passed away, but they had to get agreement and pay us well. We lived well on my mother's. She was gone, but she took care of us
And-
while she was in the.
And I want to say one more thing, and I'm gonna try to be quiet because this is one of those areas. What I found is that a lot of these things that we are telling you right now, there are meetings and everything like that about property and about and one of the things my boss always tells me, about getting educated about this information. What I oftentimes find is when I go to these meetings, these legal meetings about property and all kind of stuff like that, is majority white. I know we've been extreme. It's majority of our Caucasian brothers and sisters. After that, it's our black women that are in there. You all driven. Very few, very, very few of our black men are in those meetings. We can't be called the head of our household and our families, and these things are happening. And we don't have, because plausible deniability or ignorance and stuff like that, that stuff doesn't work with the legal field. If you come in there and tell, well, I didn't know, well, what did you do to make sure you do? Ignorance of the law is not a good defense. You can't go shoot somebody and say, well, I didn't know the law. I didn't know that was the law. Nope. Ignorance of the law is not a defense. We have to, as black African Americans, especially as us as black, because we got 3 black men. Like I said, our black women, they're going to take care of their business. So I've seen this too many times. In these business meetings, these successful meetings and everything like that, like I said, the majority of Caucasian and the other group is black women. Very, very few black men have I seen in these meetings. Go ahead.
I would like to piggyback on something he said about the black man. We know that in our community, our rate of having children out of wedlock is very high. One of the biggest issues with that is we tend to not put a child in a father's name, whether that's, sometimes we get mad, but that's the biggest mistake you can make. If that's that child's father, I don't care how much you hate him, put that child in a name. And here's the reason why. Something happens to that father and that child is not that name and he's not on the birth certificate, you don't get Social Security. And so it goes other things. If that child is not claimed, they don't get claimed to all of this stuff. We have to do a better job as men at preparing ourselves. I want to give a little short testimony. I was in the church. I had a child out of wedlock. And my dad always told me, son, if it's your child, take care of it. But it's more to that. It's the legacy. And so when you deprive a child of your last name just because you don't like his father, that's degrading. And it takes our society to another level. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Now you're sitting at the funeral home, and everybody else knew that this was his child's father, but his wife. Men, if we make mistakes, be man enough to take care of your mistakes. Because once again, we have to look for the next generation. I believe this. It's not about me. It's about what Brother Jai always say. I'm not living for me. I'm living for my daughter. I'm living for my granddaughter. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she swears she controls everything in my house. I let her believe that. If that's what you want to believe, believe it. But I got a 5'1" wife who will stump her on the ground if she challenge her. But the point is, when I had my daughter, I made sure she was in my name, because if anything happens to me, there's no doubt in my mind, she's mine. And another thing, my wife knows, because I married a woman I love and I trust. My wife knows if something happens to me, what to do for my daughter. Once again, if these conversations are not had, you don't know. Stop marrying people just because they look good. I married my wife because I knew she was going to take care of my daughter. I didn't marry my wife because she was going to take care of me. Don't let her hear you say that. Oh, she not told her. I married that woman because I knew she was going to take care of my daughter. And all of this encompasses, we need to teach our people how to make wise decisions. And so I'm begging you, go home, have these conversations. And I just think that I do these seminars all the time, and it's the same thing, same thing, same thing. Nobody wants to really have these conversations because they're scared. Okay, you be scared, but you're going to get burned up.
Let's give these brothers a hand for doing such an extraordinary job. Brother Lewis, Brother Newman, Yahweh King. Let's give the Lord a hand praise for these brothers, allowing God to use them to disseminate information. And I believe that they offered their service after this meeting. If there are any questions, you can individually visit with them, and I'm sure they will be more than glad to share that information with you, information that will be beneficial to you. Again, we have our bishop in the house. We've got our regional bishop. I want to thank God for the prelates, the leaders of this LDC. I think it's about lunchtime. But let me share this with you, pastors. I need to visit with you. We need to visit with you. So, Pop want to share. So, at this time, let us all stand. Pastors, I need you, as soon as we dismiss to come up front, we're going to go into the conference room.